for the news. We've been covering the presidential inauguration, May the 29th.
And it's a special day for Nigeria. We've seen the handover ceremony taking place at the nation's capital, the Eagle Square. Now we have a president, new president, I should add. Some people may be struggling with still calling former President Muhammadu Buhari, but now we have President Bola Tinubu at the reins of affairs, who will be running the country from this very moment. And a lot of people are saying this president has his work cut out for him. There's a lot of work to be done.
Yes, indeed. And he quite adduced a number of that too when we heard from him during his inaugural speech. But earlier, talking about much earlier in the day, we saw him take his oath of office, sworn in by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Olukayode Ariwola. And then right after, of course, it was the Vice President first, and then the President. And then right after that, there was the parade, and there was him going around, you know, waving and greeting, and then his inaugural speech. A lot of people have felt that, you know, sometimes that speech is something that a number of people look forward to. It signals the beginning of a new presidency, like a new term, and also sometimes it inspires. But a number of people have had so many, you know, have read the meaning with regards to the inaugural speech. They're given so many interpretations as to how they feel about that very first speech.
You know, different folks and different strokes for every different folks. And at the end of the day, the perception will be clearly different. And what we need to remind people is that right now we have a new president, Bola Tinubu. And some of the things he highlighted, we're going to run through some of the things he highlighted in his speech. But some people are saying that they were looking for moments like in the time of Muhammadu Buhari 8 years ago, when he said, I belong to nobody, I belong to everybody. But this president, he was quite audacious in some of his statements. For instance, when he said the fuel subsidy is gone.
Yes, indeed. One wonders what will happen to the markets now. A number of people feel that, and this is a number of experts we've spoken to weeks before today, saying that it is to be expected. But I know we will be having experts who will give us their thoughts on what this announcement, especially in a day like today, would mean for the country.
So we're going to be running through some. Let me remember some of the things he said just as a pointer to a moment ago when President Bola Tinubu, I beg your pardon.
There you go.
President Bola Tinubu went on to make his speech. He talked about that we are established as a family. He said we have defied cynics and critics who predicted our fall, but as long as there's a world, there will be Nigeria. He admonished the Nigerian spirit. He said he will not rule, but he will govern. Talking about that, remember in section 14, subsection 2A and B of the Constitution, clearly talked about that sovereignty belongs to the people of Nigeria, from which government, any government at all, derives its authority through the Constitution, and that the welfare and security of citizens is the priority and principal priority, if you will, of every government. So he said, look, I will not rule, I will govern. He talked about we'll be open to dissenting voices. All voices will matter. The election was clearly won, he said. This is perhaps the best. He said the outcome reflects the will of the people. I'm just reiterating some of the things the president said. He said, my opponents at the poll are not less patriotic because they are simply because they did not win the election. He said it's okay to seek redress in court, and that is the right path. He talked about the labor of our heroes past not being in vain. He said Nigeria is home for all. Millicent, he talked about thanking his supporters and his opponents, extending the olive branch to all of them. And he says, I know I see everyone right here, right now, as Nigeria. Millicent.
And for him, he said political colorations have faded away. And now it's really the business of Nigeria, restoring back hope for the country. Well, a number of highlights we also saw with, you know, the inaugural speech was the focus on a number of key parameters. The economy, he said that the coming days and weeks, of course, he would, you know, dish out what he has in store. He talked about the impartiality of government, and this according to the rule of law, the Constitution. He talked about insecurity, where he said that security shall be top, the absence of which, you know, we cannot have peace. So that's also a very important point. He talked about discouraging corruption, strengthening the various anti-corruption agencies, and then he mentioned job creation. Said, of course, the 1 million job creation touted during his campaign, end to extreme poverty. We know that we're averaging 133 in terms of the multidimensional poverty since that was announced late last year. He talked about defending the nation from terror and crime, remodeling our economy, developing the GDP, and he gave a figure not less than 6% growth.
Yeah.
You know, so many positives to this speech.
Yeah, he also talked about import substitution. I know that's also part of his campaign promise. He talked about there will be synergy. So you can see on your screen some of the things that the president, I almost made that mistake again, the president said. So if I'm going to read from what you're watching, security shall be the top priority of our administration because neither prosperity nor justice can prevail amidst insecurity or violence. To effectively tackle this menace, we shall reform both our security doctrine and its achievement. We shall invest more in our security personnel, and this means more than an increase in number. We shall provide better training, better equipment, pay, and firepower. So some of the things you're seeing on the screen, we're going to speak over some of them as well. But I also know that he talked about when it came to the economy, he said 18.5% interest rate is quite high. He calls it anti-people, anti-investment. And he talked about unified exchange rate, and people were applauding. So let's go back to what we're seeing on your screen, Millicent.
Indeed, talking about how this handover symbolizes trusting God, enduring faith in representative governance, belief to reshaping the nation. Says that, you know, as the world exists, Nigeria shall exist. It's contrary to some of the rumors, you know, we've heard about separation and what have we. He also said that the mission of his administration will be to improve the way of life in a manner that nurtures humanity, encourages compassion towards one another.
Amazing. So, as I said, quite audacious, quite bold, some of the things he said. So he said, Nigeria shall be impartially governed according to the Constitution and the rule of law. We shall defend the nation from terror and all forms of criminality that threaten the peace and stability of our country. And we could go on and on, but I also want to reiterate the fact that I talked about when it comes to the economy, he mentioned the fact that 1 million jobs will be created in the digital economy. He also talked about synergy between the federal government and the subnationals in power generation and distribution. I remember when he talked at Chatham House, he said the model of power in Nigeria is a broken system and it will be reviewed, where the government is both the price fixer, the regulator, and the player, and he's going to remodel all of that. So I remember I mentioned that in London. He also talked about, I'm trying to remember, yes, that youths and women will feature prominently in his campaign.
Yes, and then there were chairs.
Yeah, there were chairs, because he actually said, we're going to see it later on, he mentioned in his campaign promise that people under the ages of 40, at least 3 of them will be cabinet members, and people under the age of 50, at least 6 of them will be cabinet members, and there will be 20% representation in the MDA. So these are some of the things that the president has talked about. It's a long list of things, and we're going to be exploring all of this, taking you back to those moments at the Eagle Square, as well as remember, as the president has been sworn in, 28 others who are governors.
Yes, indeed.
18 of them are new governors,
and
10 of them are returning governors.
And we'll also be highlighting, you know, some of the swearing in, the inauguration taking place across the states. They're very interesting visuals that we have for you.
Bola, Ahmed, Tinubu, do solemnly swear that you have been faithful.
Well, those are earlier highlights of the Eagle Square with the new president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But then let's take you to, you know, what's happening or what happened earlier today in other states. Lagos is where we're beginning. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu sworn in today for a second term. So essentially, we are seeing him take his oath of office, and this is usually done by the state's justice, talking about the chief judge of Lagos State. And, you know, usually they have the support of family members, his wife there, and I think she's holding the microphone, and then he is reading out the promise, the oath of office. Very important oath that is, about abiding by the Constitution, the promise.
To the state.
Indeed, and sometimes a number of people wonder, you know, this oath, how important do they take this when we look at, you know, for those who have served before their first term, how they have served the people.
So that's Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who has just been sworn in after his first 4 year. Now he has a mandate to run for another 4 years. And that is Nigeria's biggest economy in terms of state and sub-national. We're seeing those visuals right now. So we're going to going from one state to the other. We're going to go from all this. Remember, we told you that 28 governors are being sworn in today across the federation. 18 of them are new governors, and about 10 of them are returning governors, one of which you're seeing at the moment. We know that all the governors in the Northwest are all new governors, literally. All the governors in the Northwest are new governors who are coming in for the first term. And in the Northeast, we have 5 governors that are returning. Okay, that should be visuals from Jigawa. We heard there was a little bit of an incident. Let's take a listen whether we can hear what happened.
Wow, now that is a crowd talking about the number of people who turned in for the inauguration in Jigawa State for no longer governor-elect, but Governor Umar Namadi.
I think that's the incident that happened where I think part of the stage caved in at some point, or the top of the tarpaulin, right?
Indeed. Almost caving in, and we do hope that everyone is safe.
We do hope everyone is safe, because you can see the crowd right there in Jigawa. So,
phenomenal crowd, and people trying to get off of that place.
Amazing. You know, everybody trying to get a vantage position to witness history, literally. And there's a proliferation of red caps. Literally, did you observe that, Millicent?
Yes.
What's going on?
The colors are there.
The colors are there.
Well, who knows? Who knows why they all decided to wear the red caps? But we know that the Jigawa State governor has attributed his win, especially since after the elections, to the will of God, calling on the people of the state to always remain prayerful, and says that he is committed to the development of the state. He expressed all of this joy also today, earlier, when he took that oath of office sworn in by the chief judge of the state. That's an amazing crowd there.
Amazing crowd, because at the end of the day, everybody just wants to be part of this very historic moment. We're going to walk you through, as we get the visuals across the state, we'll let you in to see the very moment when these 28 governors, are taking their oath of office. I do know that a couple of them in the Northwest, Millicent, 7 of them, I think, all new governors. In the North Central, we have 3 new governors. That's in Plateau, Benue. Which other state is there? Niger State. And then the returning ones are Kwara and, of course, Nasarawa. We also have, in the Northeast, we have 5 governors coming back, which are just a new one. And then when you come down south, in the Southwest, we have 3 new governors, returning governors, sorry. No new governors. South, we have all 4 new governors. And then in the South is all 3 new governors. We have our guest, Millicent.
Yes, we will indeed break down also a bit more of these high points and highlights of what we're seeing across the country today. But we'd like to, we've since been joined by special guests here in Lagos. Joining us, Professor Ndubisi Nwokoma, Director, Center for Economic Policy Analysis and Research with the University of Lagos. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And also Colonel Yomi Dare, popular with us here, former Director, Legal Services, Nigerian Army, CEO of International Master Security Systems Limited. It's great to have you today.
Thank you very much, Melissa.
All right. I know that you've both been following the highlights, the events, especially for the removal of fuel subsidy, which I will come to you. But I would like us to begin first with your thoughts about the first speech, inaugural speech by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Thank you very much. The first speech, in my opinion, it's satisfactory to some extent, but short in terms of details. because there are a lot of issues that somebody can bring up. But I think for somebody that wants to discuss unity and talk of oneness together, that we are better together and all that. So to that extent, I could give it a pass mark. But in terms of sectorial issues or some kind of specifics, I think it's lacking in some respect. Probably as we discuss, we'll be able to bring up those areas.
Indeed. For you, Colonel Dare.
Yeah, I think I share in the opinion of Professor Nwokoma with regards to the president's speech. Again, I would like to score him a pass mark too, because for me, what is said about security is very, very, very motivating at this point in time, because whether we like it or not, the truth is that security is of utmost concern to each and every one of us, and he spoke the words about security.
Someone said that it's a bit too early to be getting a pass mark, but then we'd like to tell you that we've been joined by another guest virtually, Mr. Jide Ojo, Development Consultant, Public Affairs Analyst. It's good to see you. Welcome to the program. All right, so if you can hear me, tell us a bit about your thoughts, your observation, what we witnessed today at the swearing-in of the president. Kindly unmute, of course, as well.
Okay. For me, the first thing is to congratulate all Nigerians on the success of this inauguration, given the fact that there are so many naysayers. Very many attempts were made to frustrate the inauguration. There are those who said it will not happen. There are those who threatened to relocate out of Nigeria if it happens. But be that as it may, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is up to a good start. He has spoken, not in parables, very directly. He has said that he will rule by, he will govern by rule of law and constitutionalism. Of course, constitutionalism is inherent and embedded in rule of law. And he has talked about removal of fuel subsidy. So there is no tongue in cheek. You and I know that from July 1, 2023, we are going to be buying fuel, PMS, at official, at a deregulated amount. I know that would be major concerns, because then you talk about price of goods and services and how this will impact. But he has struck a reconciliatory mood. He said he wants to, he has stretched the olive bands to his competitors, co-competitors who contested elections with him. He also did say he was going to give attention to Nigerian women and youth, given the fact that they are critical stakeholders in governance in Nigeria. So to a very large extent, I think, though it lacks details beyond the very few statistics of 1 million jobs created every year that he has said, and then the fact that he is going to remodel the economy, talked about bringing down the interest rate from 18.5, and then the convergence of forex, exchange rate, that is going to see to it, or is challenging the CBN to bring about a unified exchange rate, which in his own opinion is very desirable. But as it is said, talk is very cheap. People can tell you all manner of things. But then, how do you intend to implement? He has said we should not, we should wait a few days. All this will be unpacked. And mark you, he has an 80-page document, renewed dope, which he campaigned on. That renewed dope is there for us to track his campaign promises, and since he has said that he's going to govern by rule of law, and we want to see how much of rule of law in terms of fundamental human rights, equality before the law, and then the supremacy of the law. How much of that will guide his performance in office? So it's a waiting game. We look forward to his first set of appointments, perhaps later in this evening or before the end of the week. I'm sure the Chief of Staff, the Secretary to the Federal Government, his media handlers, all of those appointments should come in a few hours or days.
And Mr. Ojo, what will be those indicators for you as a development consultant that you are? Because, I mean, we see this, year in, year out, inauguration in, inauguration out. What will be those things that you think people should watch out for? And this is when we look at the activities of today, when we look at the speech, and perhaps in the coming hours, as you've mentioned.
Like I said, what we need is to dust off his renewed hope agenda, the 80-page document, where he broke down in greater details what he intends to do if he's elected into office. And the time has started to count, as it is said in one TV show, your time starts now. So the wife said yesterday that they don't need the wealth of Nigeria to lead. So it is now called to service. And he said something very instructive yesterday evening at the inauguration dinner. He said Nigerians should not pity him. So we are not going to pity him. We are going to hold him to account. We want to see how he intends to go about that renewed hope agenda that he has set for himself. He said this has been his lifelong ambition. We want to see how prepared he is for governance. He knew about the rot in the economy. He knew the state of insecurity. I mean, under Buhari, we have about, was it 63,000 lives lost to, banditry and insurgency, according to some trackers. And of course, over 3 million displaced persons and several other very unpalatable indices and statistics. But this is not time for lamentation, this is time for action. Like the late Professor Tajuddin of blessed memory said, it's now time to agonize, it's time to organize. So I look forward to the implementation of that renewed hope agenda. But I'm not too sure whether the Nigerian labor unions will not come out smoking in before the end of the day or before the end of the week, giving their opposition to removal of subsidy. And that would really set the tongue wagging, given the fact that the 30,000 and the 30,000 minimum wage are not being paid by many state governments. Many of the 28 state governments, many of the 28 new governors, they elected or new, they are meeting anti-treasury. There was newspaper report that in Benue State, the governor of Benue State, Samuel Otom, the former governor now, I should say, has left 187 billion naira, debt for Father Alia. And that will likely be the story. So if the cost of goods and services hits the rock by July, once the subsidy is removed, I'm not too sure whether there will not be mass protests against the presidency of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But it's a waiting game. What I look forward to majorly is first set of appointments. Who is he bringing to the table? Is it political jobbers or people who are technocrats who have something to offer? What would be the key performance indicators that will be set for these people that is going to be appointed? Would there be, say the kind of clannishness and what is called, provincialism? Is it going to be provincial, or is it going to be father for all, as he has indicated in his inaugural address, that is going to be the father for all Nigerians. He sees Nigerians. It doesn't see the color of ethnicity and religion is fading away. So the time has started.
Mr. Ojo, just before we come back to the studio, I remember listening to his speech. One of the things he said he will not toy with the mandate, that hope is back. But one of the very last things he said is that just let us be united. And at least with INEC's data, we can clearly see he wouldn't want him to be president, about 14 million. When you calculate Obi's 6.1, Atiku 6.9, and Okonkwo so 1 million, as against his 8.7. The question of unity right now is critical because with all of this beautiful, audacious, brave, bold, if you will, plans he has to revamp the economy, to turn around security and all of this, if the house is divided against itself, it cannot stand. So where do you think he needs to start from in uniting the country? Is it through the appointments you're talking about, or there has to be some other measure?
Thank you very much. It's going to go beyond appointments. For instance, can he do some optics by releasing Nnamdi Kanu? You know, as Professor Chukwuma Soludo, governor of Anambra State, made appeal to the outgone President Buhari last week that he should release Nnamdi Kanu. If he could do that, I'm sure this issue of sit at home in the entire 5 Southeast states will cease. And then that would be a stretching hand of fellowship. And then if you could also think of inclusion of some of the opposition elements, people like Professor Patitomi, people like Professor Kingsley Moghalu, at the risk of mentioning names, people who we know their track record, who could add value to governance. If we could extend all appointments to them, informing government of national competence. Mark my word, he didn't say government of national unity alone. He said he wants to form government of national competence. So competence and unity goes hand in hand. But there can never be peace without justice. So for me, if you could release Nnamdi Kanu on condition that he will not be a security risk to Nigeria. If he could do that, I'm sure the Southeasterners will be very happy with his government. And if he also could look at possibility of having an Igbo as number 3, as the president of the Senate, for instance, that could also be an endearment. But more importantly, let me surmise that what I would expect Ashwaju to do, the new president, the 16th president of Nigeria, is to run a government of inclusion, socio-political inclusion. Inclusive governance is very key, and it needs to go beyond politicians. You know, there are Nigerians in diaspora who have so much to offer, Nigerians who are doing great in different walks of life. You could look in their direction. That's what Obasanjo did. He attracted people like Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, brought in Dr. Obiese Kwesili. These are people that didn't have any political pedigree. They were just technocrats working for international financial institutions, and he brought them in. Somebody attracted Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, who today is African Development Bank president. So we should also look in the direction of Nigerians in diaspora. Can we get some of them to form part of his cabinet? And I also look forward to him having a lean cabinet. The outgoing president, Buhari's second term, he has 43 ministers. What do we want to do with 43 ministers in a situation where we have 77 trillion naira debt portfolio? There should be cutting down of cost of governance. I want him to see how best he could prune the cost of governance, because in this, he will also be endearing himself to the citizen. It's not for people, his lieutenants and himself, to be living large, while the majority of Nigerians live in abject poverty. He has inherited 133 million multidimensional poor Nigerians. he has inherited 3.3% unemployment rate. If he doesn't do any of this, trying to bring down and reducing unemployment, reducing corruption, reducing poverty, there is no amount of reconciliation that will be impactful. So for me, those are the low-hanging fruits you could leverage to start on a good footing. And then having dialogue with the labor unions on the issue of subsidy.
All right, we're going to see how this plays out in the coming days. Before I talk core economics, let me come to you, Prof, before we now talk core economics. Still on the issue of uniting the country. Arguably, the jury may be out on this. 8 years ago when President Muhammadu Buhari came, we could surmise to say that, look, President Bola Tinubu may not have enjoyed as much goodwill as President Buhari. That argument is depending on who you're listening to. Let's assume, for the worst, for instance, there's a place in leadership and performance that has to do with people believing in you. I read a book by Pam Jones that talked about managing for performance, when he talked about the phases in development, the forming stage, the storming, the norming before you start performing if you choose to adjourn at the end of 4 years. So in terms of making himself, making the people believe more in him, besides whatever perception the people who don't like him have, where does it start from?
Yeah, yes, I want to say clearly that more people did not vote for him than voted for him, because we had about, like we said, 6.9 million that voted for Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. We had about 6.1 that voted for Peter Obi. And you had some people that voted for Fakwanso and then the rest. So you find that if you take a look, about 14 million did not vote for him, or thereabout, within that range. And only about 8.7 or thereabout voted for him. So you can see that he has more people against him than for him. But by the time you add up all these other figures, more people didn't want him. And now he's saying, so he needs to be aware of that. I mean, his planners, those who are his managers, need to tell him that, look, there are many candidates that actually people wanted to replace you, but they are not the ones that were declared winners. So you need to be aware that you need to carry the country along. The issue of unity, even your policy should be highly inclusive. The framework, the structure of your governance should be highly inclusive. If you want to run it as a party thing, people who are white people, then you may run into some serious problems. I think these are the kind of things you should be aware of about inclusion. Not necessarily appointments, but primarily in the area of policy. The policy framework that will be Nigerian in terms of orientation. So I think he needs to be aware of that, because by the time I talk about the policy and all he has said, I think there's something very, very critical that is missing where we are. Because anybody can say, I will create jobs. If anybody can just say that, I will create jobs, I will bring down inflation, I will make interest rates to be this. Anybody can write that and read the speech. But you need to know, where are you? Where are you coming from? And where are you going? Where you are going is what he has told us. But are these things attainable, given where you are? The country, if I may use the language of in the gutters, if we say we're in deep shit currently, both as a society and also the economy, there are so many things that needs to be the background for him to begin to make those pronouncements. You're going to create jobs. What did what Buhari say 8 years ago? He even said more than that. 3 million jobs a year, but we had job losses. So you must take into account where you are and how you can come out of that pit. It's very, very critical, which I didn't see at all in the speech. We just assume we're going to make life more available. How? So when you look at those details, it's just like a speech anybody can just make, just to, it's like to carry everybody along and all that.
They're not inspired.
Yeah, exactly. So the inspiration is like we're just talking.
We're not playing the devil's advocate necessarily. He had mentioned that he's going to provide details. So he said this is more like an expanded one. But let's talk about the numbers.
Probably we'll wait for those details.
Yes, let's talk about numbers, because you're talking about where we are. And
yes.
You are an economist, and of course, I'm wondering if President Bola Tinubu calls you into a room and say, Prof, this is the worrying economic exit numbers that my predecessor left for me, 22.2% in terms of inflation. Unemployment headline is 33%, and then 42% in terms of youth unemployment, and all of this exchange rate when you look at the parallel markets, over 700 naira, as well as the interest rate that he talked about as anti-people, 18.5. Where does he start from in aggressively? Because I listened to our data analyst saying yesterday, it has to be like Usain Bolt. Some people are saying, no, it's a slow marathon. So which approach? Should it be a marathon? Should it be a sprint race for him? What does Nigeria need now?
Yes, I think first and foremost, you must secure the country. Security is very critical. For you to talk about production, you must secure the country. He has to make sure he takes a focus on security. Then the fiscal challenge is enormous. Nigeria spends about 95% or thereabout, the different figures are being passed around, of its revenue to service debts. It's crazy. So if you are earning 100 naira and you use 95 naira to pay the debt of yesterday, and you only have 5 naira to live for today, you have to borrow again. If you don't borrow again, you have to increase taxation, and there's no increase in income. Nominal income is the same, and you have inflation jumping up. So everybody has become poorer in the past 8 years. We have all become poorer because the real income has fallen drastically because you have inflation going up. So first and foremost, you must secure the country. Let people go to farm. Let the farmers be sure they can go to farm without being raped, without being kidnapped, without being killed. So the person who is farming in Benue State or who is in probably in Borno or there, can safely, without asking for permission from the terrorists, like we are told, from the bandits, say, look, I'm going to farm tomorrow. Can you allow me to come and farm? We must secure the country first and foremost so that production can take place. Can you travel from here to Aba or travel to Abuja without fear? You have to do prayer and fasting before you board the bus to go to Abuja without being kidnapped in Lokoja. I'm going there for a business, and then over there you are waylaid, and nothing is happening. So the first thing, secure the country. Let's make sure that there's security, very, very important. Then you now begin to address the fiscal challenge.
Colonel Dare, if I may come to you, which is your forte, security. Are you inspired? Some people would say insecurity in the country now is a big menace, quite difficult. Do you think that in the body language, in what he said about how important security is, that they can sit down and curb this monster?
Yeah, thank you, Millicent. Like I said earlier, I really got excited when the president, was very particular about security. I recall he said, security shall be the top priority of our administration because neither prosperity nor justice can prevail amidst insecurity and violence. I mean, everyone knows that we have in the last, maybe in the last 15 years or thereabouts, lived with our hearts in our hands. Like the Prof said, you cannot just hit the road and say you're traveling without fear of being, kidnapped. And this thing it happens, on a daily basis. Only a few are reported. So the president was very particular about this. And you recall that here in the studio, we've discussed this time and time again. So I'm happy to hear that he said it, that to effectively deal with this menace, that he also spoke about the reform of the military doctrine, and the review of the architecture, and this is what we talk about when we say we need to re-strategize, we need to rejig. So I think he has spoken to these specifics that we really need. And he went further to say that we will invest more in personnel. We'll invest more in personnel. Not just numbers, not just recruiting 20,000 people without clear direction. He says there will be improvement in equipment, improvement in pay, improvement in, there will be provision of better training pay and allowances,
welfare,
and then firepower.
Just, Millicent, sorry. What is he doing that President Buhari did not do that will give us a different result? President Buhari comes from a military background. He anchored his administration on three things: security, anti-corruption, and the economy. Literally, at the Eagle Square, he said relocating the base of the fight against terrorism to the north. And of course, one of his things he talked about for leaving, he said there were local government that were controlled by these terrorists. Now they are no longer controlled, but of course the proliferation of insecurity across the country. So you mentioned the fact that he's mentioned specifics. I'm wondering what is different from what he said that will bring a significant result besides what former President Buhari said?
Well, with all due respect, what the former president said was kind of ambiguous. He said we'll take the fight right there, so many things. But here we are. And don't forget that in fairness to the president, I think his antecedent in Lagos speaks for him, which we are believing will be replicated, on the national plane right now. He was very particular. He spoke and said that pay. So you see, I want to believe that Nigerians can no longer be taken for a ride. Everyone is an analyst now, with their pen and paper, taking particular notes. The one that affects you, like the professor of economics is here, he's going to do, an analysis of his own area. And then when I heard about security too, I've picked my pen and paper and jotting down specifics, So he has said it now, because welfare, a soldier marches, when he goes there, he marches, he wants to know what will happen to my family if in the event that I even lose my life in this battle. So it's no longer talk shop. It's not a situation where some senior personnel officers will corner what is meant for the men. No. So the soldier should know what his entitlement is. What is coming to me in the event that I even lose my life in the course of this battle. So these are what we're talking about. He says, welfare. He talked about pay. He talked about equipment. We've had cases where soldiers have gone out even to the press, to the media, to say that, look, we are ill-equipped. The firepower of the enemy is even better, it's more than what we have.
Indeed, but we've also had cases where the budget for security was much more than previous years.
Maybe that's what I wanted to find out.
Well, again, it shouldn't be business as usual. There must be accountability. Everyone, the chief of army staff, should be made to account for what has come to the army. The chief of the air staff should be made accountable for what has been given to the Air Force. The chief of the naval staff should be the Inspector General of Police. So probably in the past, nobody cared. Everyone just walked away. But I want to say that the present administration should, tread very carefully on this points. So that will make the difference, because we want to see what the difference is. And they're talking about the doctrine again. Hitherto, the type of warfare that we fought, or the kind of training that we had, is different from what we were faced with the Boko Haram insurgents. Okay? There's what you call the asymmetric warfare. There's what you call the guerrilla warfare. So these are new. It's not as if they are new concepts in warfare, but in this part of the world, we're not exposed or we're not into such. So, and I'm happy that he has said it, that, training will be given priority. And of course, there has to be a change in the architecture. We have to put those who can really perform there. I mean, not just finding, a job for people who are hanging around.
So do you see a change of guard, the army, the police, the NIA? Do you see a change?
Well, I even as we speak, the present heads of various services, I think they must have spent some time there. And then usually, since we have a new president, there must be some, changes.
I guess, Millicent, one of the reasons why I need to follow up on that, but sorry, we're dwelling on security because it's quite critical. Rob, we'll come to you. At the end of the day, one of the things that they criticize former President Muhammadu Buhari, I can't believe I'm saying that already. Former President Muhammadu Buhari.
Everything is temporary.
Former President Muhammadu Buhari is that kind of foot dragging when it comes to, firing people, literally. Now, if by the perception of the populace, they say, look, these gentlemen, we thank them that they came to serve, but their service or whatever they're offering is not good enough. They should be let go. And it looks like the president just keeps quiet, he doesn't say anything. Are you seeing a Bola Tinubu administration doing things differently? For instance, if we have things that there was a time people were being killed almost every other day. We report these things every other day. And then I think there was even an incident where the president, I understand, sent one of the hierarchy in the force to go do something. He didn't show up, and nobody was fired there. Do you see President Bola Tinubu not tolerating all of this?
Honestly, I can tell you for free that, in my opinion, and with what I have read, I mean, like I said, we're all analysts now, and we've been watching keenly. We've been watching with interest, especially the person of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. People who worked closely with him, I think they've said that, look, there's a man who will just look at you in the face and tell you that, look, you have to get a solution to this, otherwise nobody leaves this room. So that is the kind of man that we need. I believe that he's going to do, it's not going to be business as usual. I think he's going to be brutally brutal with dealing with some of these issues that...
Professor Wakoma, I want to come to you, and yes. This is when you remember the Lagos under Governor Tinubu and Nigeria now under his watch as president. What do you expect?
Well, if I can recall clearly how he governed Lagos, I think he ran an inclusive government. To that extent, I think if I look at his cabinet, people from various parts of Nigeria. So that could give you some signals as to what may happen now. Maybe, maybe not. People from Ogun State, from Anambra, and so we are in his cabinet, and he had people that that trusted him, and he trusted also. I'm sure we can hear this song, is on your mandate to stand, that kind of thing. That sends a signal that people are ready to stick out their lives or to be able to commit to whatever programs he puts forward. So if that level of loyalty existed in Lagos when he was governor, I want to believe that he must have treated people well. He must have been able to take care of them. And at the federal level, we should also expect that type of scenario where people are loyal to him, and when they are loyal, they want to deliver on kind of program, said, I want to do ABCD. And there was a time that the vice president was speaking about something that happened in some of the states in the Southwest about some election issue, and he said, and Tinubu called him, Oshiba, and said, look, I want this done. And the man told him it's not possible. He said, just find a way around it. And at the end of the day, the thing was solved. So if that type of mindset actually comes to the federal level where people are after results, just like, even my personal experience, I used to work in the bank. I was called by my general manager once, and I was told to do so and so. I want to report on my table by 2. I was given reasons. He said, I don't care how you do it. I just get this thing done, and then we can discuss the problems you encountered later. But just, I want this report on my table by 2 p.m. So I guess that kind of mindset is in Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So at the federal level, the country will gain from that.
In terms of the economy, Lagos' growth since he was governor and Nigeria's
In terms of the economy, I believe there were some things that he did which were also quite innovative. For example, the issue of the withdrawal of the funds by the federal government because of this issue of states and LCDs. And so I think he was able to enhance the IGR from a paltry amount to significantly, and tax actually was given high prominence in Lagos State. So because even now in Nigeria is not properly taxed compared to other African countries. Tax to GDP ratio in Nigeria is about 8% or thereabout in that region. But look at the African average, it's around 15% in some African countries. So if you look at that, if it's able to increase the money coming in from taxation, from taxes compared to GDP, however, must also grow income. Don't just tax people without growing income.
He had mentioned that he's not thinking of taxing in his documents, more because it's counterproductive. He's thinking of expanding the tax net.
And he did say he will look at the multiple taxation. For
yes, exactly. That's the way to go. Not necessarily to tax those paying tax already or to tax them more, but to enlarge the tax net and also to deploy technology.
Yeah, he mentioned that in his...
You have to deploy technology. If not, there will be leakages. So I think in Lagos State, he used a consultant, which people there are also issues about that, Alpha Beta, so able to collect tax, and also that helped the state significantly. So if he's going to find a way to enhance the revenue through that particular channel, I think that would be beneficial to the nation.
Let's go to Mr. Ojo because we're running out of time, so we have a lot to cover in just a few moments. Mr. Ojo, if you're still there, all of this fantastic idea and proposal by our president, Bola Tinubu, one of the things I've always had issues when it comes to politicians is the fact that when it doesn't work, they say they are saboteurs. So I think that politicians should have plans for saboteurs. What plan do you think you should have for saboteurs? Because if you say it's going to increase power generation, there are existential problems there or survival issues. People who benefit from that gap
or put an end to fuel subsidy.
If he wants to improve the economy, there are people who the arbitrage, the rent seeking is benefiting them. They are going to fight back. So what plan should he have for these saboteurs? Mr. Ojo?
To us, first, one thing I would challenge the new president to do is to see to the possibility of blocking or stopping altogether this oil theft that we have at industrial scale. How could a nation with military might such as Nigeria be losing about 1 million, out of our 1.8 million barrels per day? According to CBN governor, we are only able to produce 1.1 million as at March, April 2023. In fact, it was worse. As at September 2022, Nigeria was barely producing 800,000 barrels per day, which is why we have gone borrowing. Just imagine, just think, if we are able to block this oil theft and stop oil pipeline vandalism, do you think we would need to borrow as much as we are currently doing to fund our budget? The answer is no. So that is where sabotage comes from, because those people who are engaging in oil theft, pipeline vandalism are saboteurs. They are economic saboteurs, and they are definitely not going to stop, because they will not stop by persuading them, by calling them out. Buhari, who happens to be a military general, could not stop them. Can Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, 16th president of Nigeria, stop oil theft? Can he stop pipeline vandalism? Can he stop corruption? Look at where we are on corruption perception index. We are 150 over 200 out of 180 countries out of 180 countries surveyed in 2022. Nigeria came 150 and we scored 24 over 100. That means the economic saboteurs are thriving under the immediate past administration. And now, with the issue of fuel subsidy removal thrown into the mix, can we appeal to Nigerian labor unions the TUCs of this world, the NLCs of this world, they are the ones that kick against the sale of Blue Star, the sale of Port Harcourt and I think Kaduna refineries to Blue Star Consortium way back in 2007. They fought against President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua for him to rescind that decision of Obasanjo to sell. That's why Dangote had to go and build his own. It's part of challenge that Asiwaju will face in the coming days. So he needs to see how he will deal with the economic saboteurs and the fifth column. Fifth column needs to want to use to run down his administration.
I'm so sorry. Time is not just our friend on Inauguration Day. We have a lot to talk about, Prof. Mr. Kodendari and all of that. But let's quickly remind you that earlier we showed you visuals from one of the 28 states of the Federation where this is taking. Yes, that's visual. It's not Jigawa, that's Kano State. That's why you see
the red caps.
The red cap, the Kwankwasia movement, literally the leadership of that state is now being run by the NNPP. New
Nigeria People's Party. Sadly, those are visuals from earlier today of, that particular edifice caving in almost, and a number of people trying to get out of there. But that is quite a crowd in support of Abba Yusuf Kabir, Kano State.
Millicent, I guess we need to just start wrapping up.
Yes, we'd like to thank our special guests who have joined us for the special program, Inauguration Day. Thank you so much, Colonel Yomi Dari.
Have our last words.
If you can, in 30 seconds.
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
30 seconds. Let's begin with you, Colonel Dari.
I think it's a new beginning. It's going to be a new dawn, and everyone will be excited. I'm sure tonight the soldiers in their trenches, for those in the front
line,
they will really leap because the morale booster to hear that there's going to be a rejigging and restructuring. We should take the battle to the enemy rather than sit down.
Professor Walker.
Yes, my comment is on the fuel subsidy. I thought I would have more time to discuss that. I think they should handle it with caution. It could boomerang. There are consequences that could be difficult to manage. I believe in the removal of the fuel subsidy. However, if you do it just at once, it may have consequences. So before they embark on that, they need to take a look at the issue of the labor unions, the issue of inflation, the issue of income, poverty will be affected, and every other thing. So the fuel subsidy should be handled with caution, but I believe in it.
I don't think we have so much time for Mr. Ojo.
We do. It's a democracy. Your 30 seconds starts now. Go ahead, Mr. Ojo.
Mr. Ojo, 10 seconds, if you can.
Well, I want to see the president, the new president, respecting the rule of law as he has promised. Rule of law is the basis of everything. Let him respect federal character principles of this country as enshrined in the Constitution. Section 14 of the Constitution, and then prioritize security and welfare of citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us on our very special coverage of the 2023 presidential swearing-in inauguration of the president-elect, and the governors across the country.
So we now have a new president. In case you are not aware, President Bola Tinubu and his deputy, or vice, if you will, Kashim Shettima, and of course, we told you 28 states of the Federation are having they had their inauguration today as well. And one of those states is Rivers, which in a moment from now, you'll be watching how things went down there. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma.
And I'm Millicent Walker. Stay with Channels Television, your home for the news.
I, Olusegun Obasanjo, do solemnly swear.
My priority will be to ensure adequate peace and security.
I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
I belong to everybody and I belong to nobody.